the conference, and we're very happy to have you here today. Juliana, who is here, and myself, we are hosting this session. I am Dina Fajardo. I am from Mexico originally, and now here at the University of Cambridge doing a PhD, and I'm part of CLAREC. So welcome everyone remotely to our university. And we will start. I think Juliana will share some details about the dynamic of this space.
Yes, welcome everyone. Juliana, I did my master's last year in Cambridge, and we are really happy to share this moment with you. And thank you. I would like just to let you know if you are. I will speak in Portuguese just to say people who is listening. Watching em português, ok? Se você está assistindo em português, a gente tem a tradução simultânea, então tem os intérpretes, e para conseguir acessar, você vai embaixo, tem o globo, você clica no globo, e aí você vai para a sala de português, e aí você consegue assistir tudo em português. Dina, if you want to say it in Spanish too, please.
Sorry, I was in mute. So, hola a todos. Si estás aquí y hablas español, te invitamos a que des clic en el logo del mundo debajo, en la barra de abajo, donde dice interpretación. Ahí puedes encontrar español para que puedas escuchar la conferencia en tu idioma.
And another thing is we have 10 minutes time for each presenter, and then this time you will expose your work, but then at the end we will have time for dialogue, and I think it's the most important part of this meeting. So if you don't finish your presentation, that's fine, we will discuss more. And then before you have reached the 10 minutes, when you be in 8 minutes, around 8 minutes, I will tell you 2 minutes, and then you go to the end of your presentation. Welcome everyone.
Welcome everyone. I think I see Andrew. Are you ready? Because you're the first in the list. Otherwise, we can start with Hanji.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, great. Thank you. So we have Andrew from Trinity College Dublin. He will present us his work in Origins of Freirean Dialogue and Working Towards an Ontology of Listening. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much. And I'm just setting up the sharing of my screen, and hopefully that works for everyone. So my name is Andrew Gibson. I'm a white male with a beard, wearing glasses and a pink shirt with a blank wall behind me. So there's nothing interesting to describe what's going on behind me. What I want to do is to talk about dialogue, and dialogue is a name for a practice and a process, but it can seem sometimes be used in a largely metaphorical way as indicative of a kind of approach. What I'm interested in doing is a little bit of, I suppose, phenomenology on dialogue in Freire to understand what I think is an overlooked aspect of dialogue. So this talk will function as a kind of a reminder, making explicit of one aspect of Freire's project. And I want to ask the question, how do we learn when we are wrong? So there's a passage in Pedagogy of Hope where, after 25 years, Freire is reflecting on his first work, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He is talking about the origins of that book and how its ideas came together through his research and his experience. And in Pedagogy of Hope, he tells the story of a particular event when he was conducting research for CESI for the Industrial Social Service in Pernambuco. As part of his research process, he would give talks to the parents of the children he was researching and speak of the project results, often linking those to scholarly literature. At one of these talks, after Freire spoke for some time, he writes that, quote, a man of about 40, still rather young, but already worn out and exhausted, raised his hand and gave me the clearest and most bruising lesson I've received in my life as an educator, unquote. I won't describe everything that he says in this lesson that he gives Freire because it's worth reading in its entirety, so seek it out if you haven't already. But in outline, the man observed that Freire spoke to the audience of their lives while unaware of what living that life was truly like. Freire writes that his mistake was that he was all but oblivious to the hard reality of the audience seated before him. He goes on to describe how in the car on the way home that night, he's complaining bitterly, as he says, to his wife, Elsa Freire, who had been present at the meeting. She made the point to him that his audience understood the essentials of his talk. Indeed, the worker in his response made it clear in what he had said. She said, they understood you, but they needed to have you understand them. Freire called this the clearest and most bruising experience he'd ever received in his life as an educator and said that it seared his soul for good and all. It's clear here with Paulo Freire, with the direct intervention of his wife, Elsa Freire, is realizing the error of his approach. But that's not all. What I'm interested in is how Freire did something with the mistake that he had made, how he did something with the error in his ways. It wasn't just a bruising, because you can get a bruising and it can end that way and you can learn nothing from it. But in fact, it was transformative. My suggestion here is that if we pay attention to listening in this exchange, we come closer to understanding what occurred. Something happened within the dialogue between the man of about 40, Paulo, and Elsa Freire. And that moves beyond awareness of error, beyond epistemology. So my question is, how did this event become transformative for Paulo Freire? Dialogue is something of a problem for philosophy. Hans-Georg Gadamer notes of Plato's dialogues, from the early extant philosophical dialogues that we have, that when philosophers were reading Plato's dialogues, they paid attention to one aspect of the text at a time. If they were paying attention to the dialogical aspect of the text, the kind of openness and open-endedness of dialogue meant there was a confusion. Philosophers would struggle to establish a clear doctrine of what Plato was actually saying because they were paying attention to the dialogue. The form obscured the content for them. Perhaps because dialogue as speech is open-ended, there is scope for error to enter. And that's why philosophers are wary of dialogue and why they can have issues with it. They understand dialogue in terms of epistemology and the exchange of information. For that approach, as a kind of structure of communication, dialogue needed to be converted by philosophers into something else, into text. So that meant that the dialogue aspect gets ignored in favor of the doctrine or the content, the written word. To facilitate this, dialogue is often understood solely in terms of speech and what has been spoken. I, as a speaker, speak to someone else, it's written down, and someone can just look at what I read. In a more generous, though, and politically aware form of this, I speak with somebody else. This is closer to Freire's conception of dialogue. There's less focus on text. The role of voice is central, and indeed one of the concerns throughout Freire's work is how the voiceless come to speak. Now, Aristotle has a nice phrase where he says that the voice is a kind of sound of an ensouled thing. And this would seem to tally with Freire's view. Remember that he said, the man's words seared his soul. Talking in those terms means that, again, we're not using an epistemological conception of speech in dialogue. We're not as worried about error as epistemologists are. If we consider voice then as unsouled, it's not merely transmitting information or depositing it, as Freire criticizes the banking form of education. Think about it in this way: dialogue is not just a structure of communication, but it's actually also a structure of mutual recognition. It's a way of being in the world and being with others. It opens up a space for us to remember that dialogue is not just speech. Implied in wanting to give voice to the voiceless is that they have something to say. Submerged or implicit in this is that we should indeed listen to what they have to say. And I say listen rather than hear because I want to make a clear distinction between the two. So I'm using listening in the way that we hear a voice, the way we hear a soul. Listening is the way that we recognize the other as being in the world with us. So in our example, there was a lot of speaking, but the most significant thing was the listening. The man had listened to Paolo. Elsa listened to Paolo on the car on the way home. Elsa had also listened to the man speaking and the audience on a whole, and Paolo, in the end, listened to Elsa. Perhaps listening is not given attention because it's not speech. Perhaps it's also overlooked because listening and speaking are mutually exclusive, so that being voiceless and listening are in some way identified with one another. But listening isn't news to lots of people. Lots of people have no choice but to listen. So the challenge is then to disidentify voicelessness, to disidentify being silent with listening. The challenge is to make listening a choice we make in dialogue. It's also a reminder that in dialogue, we are listening and not merely waiting to speak. So what about other approaches that might have something to speak to us about this in terms of mutual recognition and interaction with others? Levinas is one philosopher who's paid a lot of attention to the nature of mutual recognition and the ethical. In his writing, he's concerned with how philosophy has focused too much on total systems of power and thought, and that these systems of thought can often be then insensate to suffering. But what breaks through that, what breaks through our insensitivity to suffering is what he calls the face. In contrast with totality, systems of totality and closure and domination and power, Levinas suggests that in the looking into the face of another or an other, quote, infinity presents itself as a face in the ethical resistance that paralyzes my powers, and from the depths of defenseless eyes rises firm and absolute in its nudity and its destitution. My question to Levinas from reading Freire is this: the face has eyes, but does it have ears? Another philosopher who might be useful here is Gadamer. He writes of hermeneutics and understanding text in terms of a fusion of horizons, that we must go forth to meet the text just as it meets us. It's not a one-way relationship. So we might ask what happens in the space where the horizons are overlapping, where there is that fusion. That would seem to be a space for listening. He also extends the sense of understanding beyond the text, universalizing it to say, being that can be understood is language. Very famous phrase of his. My question to Gadamer then would be, from this, whether this gives us space to consider listening in ontological terms, though Gadamer himself did not. Can we return to listening, to language's origins and dialogue? Neither of these philosophers really quite address the question I set myself, mainly, how do we learn when we are wrong? But they've helped to pose a new question. Freire writes in Pedagogy of Hope that hope is an ontological need. In this, he's drawing a contrast with the notion that hope alone will transform the world, which he calls an excellent route to hopelessness, pessimism, and fatalism. In contrast, he suggests that hope as an ontological need demands an anchoring in practice. Cohen also writes of Freire's errors generally, and the example we were discussing specifically, and says that these errors can have a transformative force, but only, I suggest, if we respond to the provocation. Dialogue alone isn't sufficient as a practice. Elsa and Paolo did not depend on speaking to effect transformative force. Listening was central to a dialogue that might remake the world. This goes some way to why we might have an ontology of listening. Listening is one important aspect of this practice of hope, one which points towards my new question that I'd like to end with, which is, why do we learn when we are wrong? Ontology concerns being, and in this sense confronts our finiteness. And Gadamer writes, language is the real mark of our finitude, but by anchoring our ontological needs in practice, reminding ourselves of how dialogue works, I want to rescue listening from mere experience. Paulo Freire listened and did something with the error he had made. This can remind us how listening is our path beyond our own limitations, and perhaps our route to the infinite.
Thank you, Andrew, for your presentation and thought-provoking questions. Now, I hope you have many questions or many ideas to share with the group. after the rest of the presentation. So we will like to welcome Angie now.
Just before, it's just because Andrew, he wasn't here when I said, but please speak slowly because we have interpreters and then they are translating into other languages. We will have more time at the end. And please put your questions in the chat too.
Okay. Thank you, Juliana. I'm going to share my slides now.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you. And thank you. I am here with my 4 co-presenters. And thank you so much for inviting us to present on this panel. Our presentation is called Making and Fighting for These Spaces. We are all either students or professors at a university in the Midwest, and we all either teach, research, talk about, dream about, engage, write about sex and reproduction at a time in the US where we're calling a post-Roe v. moment in time. I shared our slides on the screen for people to go ahead and follow along, as well as for you to go ahead and link, we added more links for more context of our presentation. Again, my name is Angie Mejia. Christine Osiki, who is a professor at public health faculty, Kara News, who is the coordinator for the reproductive health rights advocacy group on campus, and Tessie Burley is also one of the people co-presenting with me, and she is the coordinator for a similar project called the Village Food Justice Project. And I'll try to speak slow. So as I said, links for your perusal on that form. And I want to make sure that you understand why we're calling this Making and Fighting for These Spaces. We are currently in a neoliberal university that does not value either the teaching of using pedagogical models based on popular education, qualitative research, feminist education, or critical lenses to understand power, domination. So when we're fighting for these spaces, we are fighting for the spaces. We're fighting to be professors that use these modalities. We are students who are fighting to really, or are resisting models that are more valued in STEM, which are not these models of popular education. We also have links in the presentation so you can learn about our projects, but also after the presentation, we're going to welcome any questions, the 4 of us, not only about what our projects are, but also about the current state of US reproductive and sexual health rights in a post-Roe v. Wade moment. So just a little context, abortion policy in the United States, everybody has heard how the justices have let us down. It is a state-by-state issue, obviously. So we are located in a state that is called a North Star state. A North Star state is a state where most other states around us will come to us for abortion services. Right? All of us belong in some way or another to reproductive justice organizations. And we see our work as educators, as learners, or researchers really tied in to this moment in time. And I hope I'm speaking slow enough for the interpreters. I'm sorry. Okay, so the institution where we are operating, 40% of the students are what you will, I guess, demographically see as non-white. We are health sciences campus, but we don't have an on-site healthcare clinic. And our students, most of them work at Mayo Clinic, but do not have access to Mayo Clinic services. We are in a university where we have high-achieving students that are broken hungry. And we are also a university that has really trying to court Google by giving them 2.5 million for a platform that is only serving 8 students at the moment. So it is a paradox of contradictions and interesting. So you can go to the links at your leisure. So one of the things that we are doing, so Christine Osiki and I, we teach different forms of, we teach methods using popular education. Two of the classes that we are teaching, one of them is reproductive rights and justice, and applied health research methods. So a lot of the challenges we have found with our classes, first is the academic bureaucracy of just getting our courses approved, even though we usually have waiting lists with students who are already ready to take the course. We have found ourselves having to do either 3 times the work, putting extra proposals, having allies come from outside the university to really advocate for us to teach these classes. Again, although we are a STEM college, we also find ourselves with administrators who might be evangelical Christians who do not believe in abortion. So, for example, teaching our course meant that I had to go through a lot of hoops just to approve it, even though I am an assistant professor and a researcher, which should not have found those barriers to begin with. From that course, we have also asked our students, so our students were able to learn forum theater to reach college populations. So a lot of, again, this was a class that was filled after the second date of enrollment. And what emerged from the sociology class is, from this class was future connections with Planned Parenthood to actually teach forum to teenagers to be able to go ahead and supplement the type of sexual education they do not get on camp or on their high schools. Again, challenges to put these, to put a forum play, not only was the lack of support from the institution, not being able to access funds to actually put a whole entire play, sort of forms of discouragement. So, people ripping our flyers and things like that, and really not seen as a marketable type of course or event in a neoliberal context, right? So since the course or the theater of the oppressed forum does not have anything to do with what the university sees as part of their agenda, it really doesn't get advertised or supported. That it's also, and actually, so one of our presenters here, Tessie, she is an amazing joker, and she's going to be the one teaching high schoolers, secondary students, how to use Boal to talk about sex in their communities. Our research also has found, again, they become spaces for our students to learn research methods, right? But specifically at a time, and I'm sorry about that, in a time where policy and our lives are deeply embedded into how reproduction is going to look in every month, something is changing here in the US. Again, our research projects are not in line with the university's agenda, right? So it's not something that you can go ahead and teach online. So it's not seen as valuable. And then we also have found ourselves by state laws, right? So we have an intervention where we provide Plan B, emergency contraception to students, but we had to go through like 3 months of haggling with attorneys whether or not I could do that as a researcher, whether I could use my funds to buy Plan B for students, even though, there is this umbrella of academic freedom that I'm supposed to be, protected from as an assistant professor. And obviously, we have to do workarounds to conduct said research. So for example, using my own personal funds to be able to, to bypass the academic bureaucracy that we have to go through. And with that, thank you very much. So these 4 projects, we want to talk later if you have any questions for us. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Angie, for sharing your the project and the spaces that you are creating at your university. We encourage everyone to please, if you have any questions or comments for Angie and her colleagues, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll have an open conversation afterwards. So thank you, Angie. So now we welcome Steph Hanlon, and she's presenting Harnessing Freire Pedagogy, Agency Empowerment in Irish Education from a Practitioner Perspective. So welcome, Steph. You have 10 minutes to share with us your paper, and Ju will be giving you a 2 minutes notice.
Perfect. Just to say, I am co-presenting with my colleague Jared, and he's going to start off, and I'll just finish off the rest.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. This evening, as my colleague Steph has mentioned, we're going to look at harnessing Freirean pedagogy, agency and empowerment in Irish education from a practitioner perspective. I myself am a post-primary teacher. I teach politics and society and history at second level, and my colleague Steph Hanlon is a lecturer in social and political and community studies at third level. Because we're co-presenting, if I could ask for the slides to be changed when I say next slide, that would be very beneficial. Thank you. So if I could change the slide, please.
Sorry, having a little issue here with this. 1 second. Yeah, for some reason this isn't working for me. Apologies.
No problem. I'm not counting the time. And Jared, remember to speak slowly, please.
Sure. I will do.
I seem to have frozen.
I can progress with my own slides here in the meantime while we address this technical issue. I do apologize. I will speak slowly. I am fully aware that we have Spanish and Portuguese speakers here this evening. So I'm from Northern Ireland, and I'm from Belfast actually. So my accent might be very, very fast. So I will endeavour to slow down. Just quickly, an overview of our joint paper that we're co-presenting here this evening. The background to politics and society will be addressed by me momentarily, and I will also look at the challenges for politics and society and Freirean pedagogy within formal education. Then Steph is going to look at practical solutions for retaining the Freirean vision for politics and society, and she will conclude by looking at how we propose building bridges and recentering agency and empowerment for politics and society as a subject. If you could change the slide there for me as well, Steph, thank you very much. So a little background to politics and society as a subject. It is two subjects combined in one. It's political education and sociology. It's a subject that was long overdue in the Republic of Ireland, and it was first introduced way back in 2016 as part of Ireland's decade of commemorations. So that particular year was 100 years anniversary of the Easter Rising in 1916. Then the subject was piloted in 41 second level schools, and it's now delivered in over 160 schools nationwide. The aim of politics and society is to develop the learner's capacity to engage in reflective and active citizenship, informed by the insights and skills gained through the study of social and political sciences. So we believe this has the potential to empower learners, raise their consciousness, and provide them with the tools to act as agents of change. Next slide, please. So the challenges we've identified for Freirean pedagogy within formal education, firstly, is the marginalization and exclusion of students and schools in disadvantaged areas, the dilution of and co-option of Freirean pedagogy into formal education, and the perception of politics and society in schools with a religious ethos. So the first challenge, that marginalization and exclusion of students and schools in disadvantaged areas. There are concerns regarding politics and society not being delivered in enough secondary schools in lower socioeconomic areas. We've identified a result from lack of demand, resources, and an understanding of its potential to to impact real social change. 88% of secondary schools offering the subject can be found in higher socio-economic areas. And there is a fear that the subject might become the preserve of schools in more affluent or middle class areas. And that would reflect electoral boundaries. Challenge 2, the dilution and co-option of Freirean pedagogy into formal education. Those challenges around the dilution of the subject and replacing it with a voluntaristic, depoliticized notion of civil society based on promoting social capital. This may result in orienting it away from political activism and directing it towards a more socially conservative conceptions of active citizenship, developing critical thinking skills, but flattened and dampened somewhat. Equality, diversity, and inclusion have become widely used buzzwords, and there's a danger of politics and society as a subject being co-opted to fit the language of EDI within a managerial logic with no reference to the forces that produce and perpetuate poverty. And finally, the third challenge, the perception of politics and society in schools with a religious ethos. That perception of the subject and religious education is in a binary opposition, and this mirrors the division between academic disciplines and practices. There is an assumption that religion and politics cannot speak to and inform one another, and these assumptions can result in the classroom as a site of exclusion and othering. So now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Steph, who's going to talk about practical solutions for retaining that Freirean vision.
Thanks, Jared. Thank you so much for having us, everyone. I know we spoke about the challenges, and it's not all negative. We have some solutions for this, and we're both very passionate in where we're coming from. And one of the ways that we can see about going about this is through really a problem posing approach. And some of the solutions that we have identified are really placing an emphasis on combating marginalization and exclusion through practical methods, preventing that co-option of Freirean pedagogy into formal education, but then also countering the perception of politics and society and building that bridge between religious education through, Freirean liberation theology. So solution 1, we really want to seek ways to address the gap between teacher knowledge and confidence. And a key aspect of that would be reflective practice. So one of the key issues is the quality provision of continued professional development for teachers. And Jared is very active in that, focusing on pedagogy, culture circles, problem posing, dialogue, and of course, raising critical consciousness. So we need closer links between third level and between second level institutions, and also those practitioners, both in education and outside, to offer support in meeting these needs and to help bridge the gap between that theory and that practice. So we need to help schools also realize how accessible politics and society can be for students of all abilities and backgrounds, while promoting its potential to create meaningful and lasting social change. The second solution, is in relation to preventing this co-option. And we're arguing that students must develop a clear understanding of social stratification, social class, and social conflict theory. And this can easily be overlooked in the delivery of politics and society, as it is only partly addressed in the subject specification. But by centering it around class and stratification, students can be better equipped to meet the learning outcomes of each of the course strands. And it is critical for us that teachers are trained in how to teach critical analysis, how to engage in reflective practice, but also engage in reflective practice themselves, and also how to guide participatory learning and collaboration. So provisions, must also be made for student teachers to deliver those elements during their teaching practice. And the last solution for us is really about countering that perception of politics and society. Ireland is quite a religious country, but we really want to promote dialogue between educators and students of religious education and politics and society in order to highlight the links between education for liberation and the theologies of liberation. So religious education and politics and society, we maintain, have a distinct core, which can be referred to as the liberative experience, and neither one is reducible to the other. So politics and society, you know, it does commit an openness to this and an informed openness where students and teachers through the syllabus can develop a sense of solidarity, empathy, and a commitment to relate to the other. So in conclusion, we really, you know, this conference call, it really spoke to us because we are actively seeking ways in which we can build bridges between popular education and formal education. But in order to do that, we need to locate and recognize the critical role of teachers, politics, society, but also we really want to emphasize that need for developing a critical consciousness, but one that is underpinned by a commitment to action for social change that has a view to utilizing and applying knowledge and skills in real-world contexts. And the task for us that lies ahead is one of facilitating, of enabling and creating opportunities for teachers as learners, building teacher knowledge and competence to grow and develop in and of themselves. But to do this, we really look to establishing relationships between education practitioners, activists, to share knowledge and learn from one another in and across disciplines. And hopefully, we believe that this will help raise awareness of the relational nature of politics and society for schools with a religious ethos. So as Jared said, this is it's early days for this subject. We are both very passionate and excited about it. And we would love to hear from you if you are ever interested in giving us some feedback or communicating with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Gerard and Steph. Really nice to see what is happening in practice. Sometimes it's difficult to relate. So thank you for sharing with us your experience. For everyone, we see some comments in the chat. Thank you for that. And also, if you have some questions, please save them for the next part or write them there in the chat. So now we are going to Isbekele here. I don't think so. No, I think he's not here. So we want to welcome Happy Singu Hansen from the Loughborough University in London. Happy, are you here? Yes, I think you're here. Happy?
Oh,
okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was just talking by myself here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome. Do you have any slides that you would like to share?
Slides, and I was a little bit confused when I was seeing everyone with slides, but
it's okay.
I'm just presenting from Tanzania, and I had to travel because of the family issues. My mother got an accident and just suddenly we lost her. So, but I wanted to continue with this presentation today. So, yeah.
Thank you. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. My presentation is about my, mostly about the paper that I submitted, and it was already published in the book on Freire, and it's about the rethinking education and learning in Tanzania, a Freire pedagogy of education and learning in Tanzania. But also I want to say something about my PhD, because that was developed for my PhD thesis as well. So I can as well get feedback from you. So my thesis is also about youth, civil society and social change. And I'm engaging with one of the civil society organization in Tanzania, which has been established since 1999. and it has been using communication and media tools to reach different youth groups in Tanzania, those who are in schools, secondary schools, and those who are not have the opportunity to go to schools. And I'm looking in that civil society communication strategies and asking how does the youth participation in civil society foster them as active citizens. And I'm using Freire's Freirean pedagogue of the oppressed, which is really important and for me and for my study. And I'm looking on how this Freire look at effective participation in power as important to nurture youth as active human beings, considering that youth in Tanzania have been one of the most disadvantaged group, or those who have been lacking voice to speak and express their opinion, both from the public sector, which the political system that has not been put to foster youth development, but also from the social, the family, or the community. At the community level, youth are expected to be quiet and to listen to their parents or the elder people. So it's not like, it's meant to be respectful to the elder, which is totally understood. But as a consequence, it does not give young people the freedom to speak and to make argument among the when they are in the discussion with the older people. In that case, youth are expected to be more quiet and to listen instead of expressing what they feel. And at the same time, I'm looking at so all those kind of, also in schools, youth that cannot really challenge or speak when they are in the classrooms, and they cannot argue with their teachers since they are older than them. And also this limit them to have the opportunity to speak. So this civil society organization in Tanzania called Femina Hip has been creating the platform for young people to participate and to nurture their voices, I can say that, by providing different or using different media tools to communicate or to communicate with young people, but to engage them as well, young people to have their voice, to speak, and in a way that not to criticize, but to have their own, to put forward their own interests as young people and their own concerns and discuss them in schools and also in streets. And so I'm using the pedagogue of a press to Freire's pedagogue to see how young people participation in civil society, or effective participation, how does it nurture them as active citizen? Yeah, so thank you.
Happy. Thank you, and we are so sorry, and thank you for your contribution, and we are sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Happy, for sharing, for finding the time to share with us your about your work in Tanzania, and what you are doing to help young people to express themselves. So I hope there are questions for you around the group. I
have a share, but
sure.
I'll share any questions. If you have anything to ask, please. I will be happy to share.
Thank you. Sure. So should we go to the next presenter, and then I hope we can come back to the questions afterwards. So Sandra Holtgren.
Sandra, you are mute. The mic.
So, yeah, thank you. My name is Sandra. I hope you can see my slides. I have to keep it that way to present. Well, I have shortly described, I have short brown hair, some glasses for those who cannot see me on screen now, and just a blurred background and a black pullover. I am from Rhein-Main University of Applied Sciences in the middle of Germany. And I want to share with you the talk Together but Not Together, Practical Reflections on Knowledge Co-Production Online, which is a reflection from a research project that I conducted last year. And I want to show you first two reasons why I think this is important, namely that many efforts I see are made to underline the necessity of participatory horizontal approaches, but less is thought about the practices of their implementation. And second, those who do look actually at the practices tend to underline more the successful strategies, but less of the ambivalences and struggles when actually putting some measures into the practice. So my input is a contribution to these two. And briefly on the context, I was asked to plan and organize a transatlantic graduate researchers academy across Europe and the Americas last year that had been shifted twice due to the pandemic. That consisted of 6 preparatory sessions in which participants exchanged on the topics and prepared contributions for a 3-day final congress in which they presented their research and also prepared a poster and a talk. So you can see the main data of this conference on the slide, and the conveners asked me to develop this event in a hybrid format and conduct the sessions. So I was coordinating, but at the same time, I had a research inquiry. What actually happens when you make knowledge, horizontal knowledge production, your conceptual base for the planning and the execution of such an event? Will something differ from conferences as we know them if you take horizontal knowledge production as your basic? And to figure that out, I used the event series I was organizing and wrote an ethnographic field diary between April 2020 and June 2021 with a total of 12 entries that described rememberable interactions, or what I thought of rememberable, in terms of putting horizontality into practice. And once the final Congress was concluded, I analyzed these entries using analytical autoethnography. And with all the controversial opinions that exist on autoethnography as a method, using my own lived experience, as Susan O'Hara would call it, was the only chance I had in the given conditions to approach these implementers' perspectives very lively. Before I come to what I found, I want to quickly show you what I mean by horizontal knowledge production. That's the methodology that Sara Corona-Berkin was talking a lot about, and that consists of 3 pillars. First, the fact that you are equals in discussions, even though one person might be a researcher, the other one a community leader, for example. She calls that discursive equality. The second, that you reflect on foundational conflicts, which for her means to recognize your differences despite the fact that they are not always visible, because she speaks about epistemic standpoints that might look very different, although a person share the same experiences, origins, or a gender, or they might look very similar, although the persons grew up in completely different places. So the third aspect is that you produce a collective output which keeps these diverse epistemic standpoints alive. That's what she calls autonomy of voices. And in our event series, that boiled down to activities like reaching out to as many diverse participants as possible, making sure that people from remote communities in the Amazon could participate in sessions as much as people from metropolis like Berlin or Mexico City. Or we used alternative formats like circular discussions, like word clouds to produce knowledge. We try to make decisions consensually instead of democratically, or we used language that is very sensitive to differences, etc. More recently, Sara Corona also alerted about 3 barriers that prevent horizontal knowledge production from occurring, and that is first your own shadows, which means the fears, your discourage, your anger that keep you as a researcher or coordinator in my field from active listening to the other. Political passion that clouds your judgment because you're acting upon wishful thinking for outcomes that you want to see. And institutional involvements because you have a certain role to fulfill or norms that you have to follow, which might go against a process of producing knowledge horizontally. This was the case, for example, for my formal official role as a coordinator that binds me to a certain behavior. Now, the points that I am showing you are now some text passages from the field diary that I wrote. And of course, I anonymized the passages that do not concern myself and the situations accordingly. But unfortunately, I don't have the time to read out the whole passage, but I quote the texts in bold so you get an idea of the essence of what I'm telling here. And the first point relates to the aspect of political passion. In the beginning, I was extremely excited because I wanted to create something different and new, which filled me with euphoria. And at the end of the conference, when you look on the right side of the slide, this looked very different. Here, my relief came from the whole thing being over. So I wrote in the beginning, sorry for that. Starting something new always excites me. Thousands of ideas flood my head and nothing went wrong yet. Thousands of possibilities open to me and nothing is determined. And only a couple of months later, what I wrote was, I am so glad the academy is over now. I had very bright moments and equally troubling, unpleasant incidents. I will surely think about all the revolutions that failed during my work in the academy. I've seen personal and structural limits of what happens when you mess with power. So the one thing to keep in mind from this is that putting horizontal knowledge into practice means to be potentially confronted with disenchantment, and it requires the capacities to use your experience productively. The second point I want to show relates to institutional implications and also to shadows to a certain extent, namely my role expectations. And in the first half of this text passage, you can see the unease of my self-perception with the role I had to fulfill. So I could not really make peace with the fact that I had a special role from the group that made me different and that contained potential hierarchies. I was writing, it always feels strange that I'm surrounded by professionals of the same career stage like me. What can I tell them about writing and pitching? And at the same time, I'm sure that I should make sure that people make most out of their topics for the Congress. At least that is the expectation as I understand it. I like to see myself more as a part of the group than a lecturer, but lecturing is what it feels like. So the second part of the quote shows a role that I had completely underestimated until analyzing this material again, and that was the role of being a virtual participant. I focused on roles that I knew from the literature, from studying before, like student-teacher relations or coordinator-participant or researcher-research relations, because this is what hierarchies are discussed a lot about. But I didn't recognize until the end that this online role was so crucially affecting our practices in the academy, although it seemed evident. I was writing, the online forum is not very responsive, so we had an online forum to exchange between sessions. I think the virtual space makes us like this, slow, passive, less available. It takes more time for the group to get to know each other and to find a routine of working together that requires more moderation, which makes me feel like a teacher again. So putting horizontal knowledge production into practice here requires the capacity, to my view, to recognize the differences that are actually there, and those are not always evident. And the third point, before I come to concluding and wrapping it up, is relating to tokenism. And here, what you need to know is that over course of time, I handed over the responsibilities to a new manager. So I changed my position from an organizer to an observer. And the quote shows the anger I felt about actions that I judged as tokenistic. I could not really accept my new position of not interfering and accepting this way of commenting that sounded so paternalist to me. So my institutional role didn't allow me to intervene unless I wanted to crush the setting on the cost of the participants. And I wrote this: I am not sure if they had understood what a dialogue roundtable means, or maybe this was what they had agreed upon with the commentators. I don't know. I shouldn't care. It's none of my business anymore. And yet I can't prevent myself from thinking about all the things I had in mind for this and that didn't take place. So this third point, related to putting horizontal knowledge production into practice, is not something that you can do alone. It needs a very careful discussion before an event and briefing that everybody who takes an organizing role on this is on the same page, what makes a horizontal again. And this was, again, to a limited extent the case. And I will skip this next slide to wrap it up, but the main takeaway of what I want to tell is that with respect to putting horizontal knowledge production, participatory measures into practice, I think it is really worth or not enough simply to need or want a dialogue or to say it 100 times that you want to practice it. But that's a precondition. And I think that, and instead, I hope also that my insights, although they are quite critical on what I could show here, can motivate us together to not be satisfied with that, but to dig deeper and not shy away, discussing where those actions to decolonize, to dialogue, to participate actually fall behind the expectations and take some lessons to get better at it over time. I stop here and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Sandra. This was very insightful with all the challenges that comes with this idea. So thank you very much for sharing. And if you have if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat or write them down so you don't forget for the last part of the session. And we welcome Tara from Arizona State University, who is sharing Freire and the transformative potential of school participatory budgeting. So welcome, Tara.
All right, is everyone able to see my screen? I will make it into speaker mode. All right, how's that? We're good?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone. My name is Tara Bartlett. I am at Arizona State University and also part of the Participatory Governance Initiative. My co-author, Danielle Shigorensky, is also here today in our Zoom room, and he will be here and interjecting when he feels fit. So a little bit of grounding around how our work has connected to Freire is this idea of being reinvented. And so our work really lands in the space of reinventing Freire, especially in our 21st century, and especially alongside a lot of the same challenges that other presenters have shared with us today. During the 1940s, we know Freire was the director of the social service industry and was really a champion for different principles around democratic learning, specifically dialogue, tenets of democracy and self-governance, and coined the term the parliamentarization, which was a combination of both study and action groups. During the 1980s, Freire returned and became Secretary of Education and then championed what is the Citizen School for Escola Ciudadana, which are schools that are the sites for this social transformation, but then also mobility, but really also championed school democracy under this idea of skills and doable solutions and having students be part of the participatory decision-making processes within schools. There's 3 pathways that I would like to highlight around Freire Citizen School. The first one was that the schools themselves should be accessible and that there should be sound pedagogical constructs around that access. The second one is that the school curriculum should be participatory with opportunities for students to be able to make decisions around the school curriculum, but then also be part of the dialogue within the school curriculum. And the last and third is the idea of governance and the decision-making skills and having students be part of that alongside building relationships. And I know there's a lot to consume on this data chart here. I would just like to highlight that this aligns very well with the previous presentation that really talked about inequity in terms of access around school democracy. Across the top in the gray, you can certainly see there's different practices and research-based ideas that really further school democracy. And then across the left side there are different demographic groups and whether they receive these or not. So if you are not a statistician, anything that is a negative shows that that group does not have access when compared to other groups with the across the top civic learning opportunity. If there are the asterisks behind a number, the more asterisks, the more spread there is between that group and others. So those are statistically significant. And I will just highlight one of these practices that I think really lends itself to Freire's work, which is that open classroom climate. So back to the dialogue that happens within the classroom amongst students. You can see there that the African-American, Asian, and Latino and other racial groups, almost all of them, and this is in comparison to the control group of white students, they receive significantly less opportunities to dialogue within an open classroom climate. So not only opportunities, but equipping them with the skills to do so. And I'm happy to share this after the fact. The paper where these findings can be found is there on the bottom, the Khan and Mada paper. So now I would like to introduce the work that my co-author Danielle and I have been doing on the ground here in Arizona, and have also assisted with these different projects nationally and internationally as well. But what we are here to talk about is the concept of school participatory budgeting. And it really is driving home the idea of citizenship education so that students are equipped with the knowledge, the attitudes, the skills, and the practices that they need to engage long-term within their communities. It also helps with civic engagement and political participation within their communities, and then really is a driver for school democracy. So within school participatory budgeting, it derived from the municipal model of participatory budgeting, which is actually based out of Porto Alegre, Brazil, from 1989. And it's a democratic process in which stakeholders, in this case, at the city level, these would be community members, deliberate and make decisions around a public budget. And we would just like to highlight that every budget essentially is a policy without rhetoric. So if you're ever interested in a group, especially nonprofits, on how they stand on particular issues, you can always look at their budget and see what they support through their monies that essentially equates to policies. And so having students be part of participatory budgeting is a new wave of expansion that we're seeing both in the US, but also across the world. This is the process itself of participatory budgeting, and I would just like to highlight the website there on the bottom, arizonafuture.org. My co-author Danielle and I do a lot of work with this organization here in Arizona, and they are the folks behind helping schools actualize this process within their schools. But participatory budgeting follows this process where the students come together with school administrators to design the process. They decide on the budget, they decide how long the timeline might be, and they decide parameters around the different ideas. For example, the ideas must be sustainable, the ideas must impact the greatest number of students, or the ideas must align, obviously, with the budget, but then also other policies. And so that design process is really key to making sure the rest of the process runs smoothly. After the process is designed, the students that are part of a steering committee group collect ideas from the rest of the student body on what they would like to spend that money on to improve their school community. Once those ideas have been brainstormed, the student steering committee then goes through those ideas and combines similar project ideas. Obviously, if something does not fit within the parameters, that idea does not move forward, but they are the ones that essentially create what the ideas are that move to the next step in order to develop those ideas into proposals. And these proposals you can think of very much a campaign-like atmosphere where the students create a public service announcement around these different ideas and campaign for these ideas within their school community over a period of time. And then once those ideas have gone through the developing and the campaign phase, the whole student body then casts a vote around which ideas would be funded. The school itself then funds those winning projects, and we often here in Arizona do some type of evaluation of student learning and process outcomes. And then that school will start the cycle over the next following school year. Now, I do have a video, and I know there were some concerns on making sure folks would be able to understand. So I was able to bring the video up on a different, on the website itself, and I did bring up the Spanish subtitles. So folks that are here and might need those, I'm going to play that. I didn't have an opportunity to put other subtitles on there. But the video is in English with Spanish subtitles, so hopefully this is helpful. But this video might be able to give you an audio-visual idea of what the process looks like.
Or you go to school at any place, you should be able to have a say in how to spend the money that affects your life.
What are the real needs of the community? If you only have a certain amount of money, what is it that you can do that's going to benefit as many people as possible?
Students Union was the first school-based program to be initiated, and we were wondering how will this work in the school community, and it's worked beautifully.
It empowers the students and it teaches them about the importance of civic engagement in a way that will actually impact them.
We're implementing a project that we call participatory budgeting.
That's done by splitting up and coming up with ideas.
Each grade level had 50 ideas, and then we had to take all 50 ideas from each grade level and then make them smaller.
And then you present those ideas to the students.
And from there, we made proposals, and then now we have people voting on which project they want to see new here.
The students are going to be the ones that are going to be deciding this.
We're going to be able to see a change that the whole school is actually deciding on.
Seeing everybody come together and participate in this one thing that is going to benefit them and our school as a whole was exciting to see.
Participatory budgeting is not only an investment in the school, but it's an investment in our students' critical thinking, communication, problem-solving abilities, and their buy-in and ownership of the school.
If the students as a whole decide on what the school gets to be or what it gets to have, it's much more empowering to the student. It's like they have control over what environment they're raised in.
Sometimes we don't even have a voice, we don't have a say in anything.
So this honestly does help.
This is actually my first time that I've ever voted in something.
It makes people want to be better advocates for themselves and not having that hesitancy to say what you want because it's your community.
I ended up voting for the water project.
A garden,
The musical instrument.
the fitness,
The shade.
The art supplies, the audio and visual one.
Thanks for voting.
They're voting.
We want future Americans to be engaged and make sure that they're able not just to make choices and have opinions, but actually go and do the democracy.
And an informed vote counts for a lot. And I think having an opportunity to start practicing that now in a positive change that you see on campus, it's proof of concept for a lot of people.
It's made me think about being a citizen, and so working with other people and getting their ideas really expands my mindset.
When I get older, I still want to be seeing what's wrong with my community, coming up with ways to fix it, and then acting upon it. That's what I like doing. I just never really gotten the chance to act upon it till now because of PB. With this experience, I can go much higher, possibly even the government, to do bigger projects that is not just in a school or a community, but possibly the whole city.
And if our job is to create great young men and young women, the PB process, in our opinion, it's a no-brainer.
I was a little bit nervous, not understanding how we would make this work in a school setting, but the guidance that's provided through participatory budget project really made this easy.
PB's process is really important and kind of easy in practice for every high school.
What happens in cities, it happens in districts, it happens in public housing.
Anybody across the country, across the world could probably do PB.
Thank you. All right. How many more minutes do I have, Juliana?
Actually, I let you keep going with the video because it was 8 and then we passed, but we will come back to you at the end. But
Okay. Sounds great. So should I wait to finish then, or?
yeah, and then you after, then we will have the conversation, then you can finish, but without the slides, we will go more for a discussion and dialogue. But thank you.
Thank you, Tara and Daniel, for sharing your project with us. I'm sorry that we couldn't finish your presentation, but we will welcome now Yu Wang. She will be presenting a coherent framework for futures literacy. She's from the University of Edinburgh.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Actually, this study is my master dissertation. So first, I will introduce the background of the futures literacy. Due to the issues with
excuse me, just to interrupt, and could you put in the mode of presentation? It's just if you click in the small glass, just down there. Did you go down? Yeah. No. Someone can jump in and try to explain where we find it. Is
if you click on slideshow at the top, it's along at the top, higher and to the right. Slideshow in the middle of the screen at the top.
Yeah, it's just beside review, animations, yeah, design. You keep going, right?
To the right.
Right. Yeah, right. Design. Keep going to the right. Right. And then it's after animations.
No, they're blocked.
Ah, they're blocked.
Yeah, I can't see the word on the up.
Can you see on the bottom where there's a scale that shows from negative to positive on the bottom right? There's a little symbol next to the scale on the bottom.
Yeah, slideshow. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. So first I will introduce the background about the futures literacy because it's a quite new concept. And due to the issues with globalization, the increasingly complex and unsustainable changes in society, this means that it's necessary to re-examine the knowledge to determine how to better contribute to global common interests. So in 2020s, UNESCO just published a book which proposed the concept of futures literacy. Issues futures literacy must be incorporated into education reform, particularly in higher education. And in 2022, the concept of futures literacy refers to the skills that enable people to understand the relationship between the future and themselves, while maintaining a creative role. In addition, because the literacy is a skill that everyone can and should master, futures literacy is derived from the literacy and should be a universally available skill. And the problem is that although UNESCO has gathered lots of ideas about this concept, but these suggestions has not been integrated into a system. So my research question are, what are the main aspects of the cultivation of futures literacy and how should futures literacy be applied in practice? Because it's a quite new concept, so I can only choose the literary review as my method, but I choose Freire's critical pedagogy as my research philosophy. As for the UNESCO, which I just divided the idea about futures literacy into 3 aspects. And the other 2 scholars, they also set up a very simple futures literacy framework, which consists of 4 sets of skills. If we have time, I'll explain these 4 sets of skills later. But the key point that the theoretical basis is the critical pedagogy of Freire. So for the first aspect is multidiscipline. The 7 Biden states that the current approach to teaching oversimplifies the existing complexity of real-world environments. Under neoliberal political economy, students are regarded as the customers in the job market, and university courses act as the products designed to improve graduates' earning power. So it's quite opposite to the core of Freire's critical pedagogy, because Freire thinks the way we educated young people is related to the future we want, which should provide students with a life that depends of freedom and social justice. And the second aspect is global citizenship. The definition of culture in many formal courses is narrow because these curricula are designed to cooperate with dynamic cultural backgrounds. So the UNESCO thing in aspiring to the sustainable development goals, future education is wrongly committed to cultivating global citizens who internalize the democratic, inclusive norms and serve to a global public good. And as for the Freire thinking, in the future education, it is important to carry out the reform with futures literacy because there's no literal educational process. Education is either used as a tool to promote integration of generations into the logic of the current systems and make it conform to the current system, or as a means for men and women to critically deal with reality and discover how to participate in world change. And the key aspect, I think, is the last one, is subjectification. How to explain this idea, we can see from Butler. He said the curriculum should consider students as subjects. Students' personal learning process is driven by their own needs. And by Freire, the banking education mode can only regard teachers as subjects, so the teachers require vacant students to meekly accept course content determined by the teachers. And we can see the banking education mode protects the opposite authorities by controlling the development of ideas and critically reflective action in the world. So this education adapts people to the current world rather than understanding the change and interconnectedness in the world. So in this banking education mode, the more a student attempts to store knowledge, the more passive they can be. Therefore, the students' independent thinking can be deprived by this model. So incorporate the tricky proposed a new idea about the new model. The core principle of modern education philosophy entitles cultivating people into responsible subjects, a principle likely to persist in the future education. So we can see Freire also add another model that is good for this subject. This is a problems posing education mode. Such a mode of education regards the knowledge as the intermediary object of both students and teachers. So the problem-posing education can guide students to understand and respond to real problems in their world. So they can guide both the teachers and students towards critical perspectives of the world. So as for the implementation, I think the educational leadership idea in Finland can be a good case to explain why the futures literacy can be implemented in the education system. In the current Finnish education leadership model, this sets the future-oriented goals. So it depends on the past occurs in the present and can respond to the future changes. And as for the educational leadership, they regard people as the subjects, so people can take actions to seize the opportunities, and they can control and resist the external force. So yeah, I think I have finished.
Thank you, Yu. Thank you, Yu, for your presentation and for sharing with us your insights on the futures literacy. So we have our last but not least presentation from Simone Maria Gugliotta.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
So my name is Simone Gugliotta. I'm from Smith College in Massachusetts. And Just to let you know, I have long brown hair and a blue shirt. And behind me, I have some representations of Italy and Brazil, but you cannot see very well. So my research is still going, but it's part of my dissertation. I did a PhD in education at the University of Massachusetts, and I teach now Portuguese and Italian and a course in education here at Smith College. I've been looking for what's there about many educators, but especially about Paulo Freire and an Italian educator called Lorenzo Milani. Let me change here. So what brought me to this work was this interest, first in languages, but then combining with education and looking around about the legacies. I know, I think in Tara's slide, there was this mention that Paulo Freire said he will be reinvented. And that's true. A lot of people ask me if Paulo Freire and Lorenzo Milano are methods, like the Montessori method, Waldorf method. And it's not. What we have are the mindset, the philosophy that we can apply, cross bridges and bring their ideas in many settings. And I will show it. I will present you. Most of all of you, I believe, know Paulo Freire well. And I will present you Lorenzo Milano, I believe. Less people know about Lorenzo Milani. He was an Italian priest, and he has many coincidences with Paulo Freire's mentality and work and philosophy. And he was a priest who converted to Catholicism when he was 20 years old. He comes from a Jewish family in Italy who has to hide the fact that they were Jewish because they lived in Italy during the fascism, during Mussolini. And Don Milani, he started working as a priest, and he notes that what the people needed were schools. They needed to read and write well. So he started his own evening school within the church. And it was a very open school where everybody was welcome. Everybody could go, even if they were not religious. He even took the cross out of the wall because he wanted to make the space very democratic. And the discussions that they had were like very similar to the discussions that Paulo Freire would have in the circles of to talk about politics and to help people be conscious about their position in the world and knowing how to vote specifically, knowing about their right of voting. As you know, with the project of literacy in Brazil, Paulo Freire was helping people to learn, read and write, because at the time, people could not vote if they didn't know how to read and write. So the method of teaching in 40 days was related to helping people to be aware of their rights as citizens. So that's another similar thing that they had between them. One more thing, Lorenzo Milani was sent to exile also because of his ideas, because of his school, by the church. They didn't send him to another country, but within Italy, they sent him to the mountains in Tuscany in a very, very small village where they thought he would not spread his ideas anymore. He would not make a school. But they tried to shut him up, but they made him more expressive. With this little church in the mountains, he was able to create a school called Scuola di Barbiana. And through this school, he had a lot of children who were rejected by the public school, who were considered not able to be in school. And he was accepting all these people and all the oppressed kids, all the children who could not be in the regular school, in the regular system. So, my research starts with a very a personal sadness, because they are contemporary. One was born in 1921, Paulo Freire, the other one 1923, and they have never met. And that's my big sadness. But Dom Milani never heard about Paulo Freire. He died very early. He was only 44 years old. He had a cancer. But Paulo Freire learned about Dom Milani, and he even said that they were very similar. That and other people in Italy, one of the students of Dom Milani contacted Paulo Freire to ask him to write the postface, a part of a book that he was publishing about one of Lorenzo's methods, which was about escritura coletiva, collective writing. The students would write articles and texts together. So Paulo Freire was invited, and he wrote about it, and he mentioned how similar they were. And so I was looking for schools that could show me how their work is still evident nowadays. And the main connection among them, as I said, was critical pedagogy and critical consciousness, and how their contribution can still inform critical pedagogies nowadays. And this first part, looking for schools where I could go and observe it and do my research, was the harder part of the project. I didn't have contacted many schools that had Freire ideas or that claimed to have Freire ideas. I didn't have many answers back. The ones that I thought that I could go in the US, someone said, no, this one specifically is not exactly what we're looking for. So it was a very hard process until I found one in the northeast of Brazil, where I was very welcomed and I could do my research. And the other one about Milani's, I went to a school who really follows Milani's philosophy, very inclusive, giving agents to the students who had difficulty in other schools and are welcome to this school. They are a very, very inclusive school in many ways. We'll talk more about that. My research questions are these, but I will concentrate more in what ways have their pedagogical practice inspired new teaching strategies and innovation. So the first case study was in this school in the northeast of Brazil. I used the ethnography to do my research. And this school, I have to say, the school is not everybody in the school agrees or uses Paulo Freire in their teaching. So even there, the coordinator helped me to and addressed me to the classrooms where Paulo Freire his ideas, his mentality is used. And in this school, I would say it's a school that has classes in the morning, then other classes in the afternoon, and classes in the evening for adults. The evening classes, one of the teachers, she does her best to really still use Paulo Freire's methods. And it was a beautiful experience for me to see these women so engaged in keeping the legacy of Freire present and helping so many adults to read and write nowadays. The day school, morning and afternoon, I observed two different teachers, and they, not much the method, I wouldn't say that they use the method, but what they use, it's the mindset, it's the philosophy. I was able to present very important, very moments of the classroom with dialogue, with them empowering the students, with them explaining them their rights, even in the school. Let me go to the next slide. That's 2 minutes. Okay, that's one example of the evening school. this student, I interviewed her. She said her husband didn't want her to go to school, but she said, I'm going. And she was there and she was very proud of it and telling me that, and she asked me if she could be interviewed to tell me her story, because she was so proud of reading and write, even if she was over 50 years old. Here, it's some model of the school, some class in circle. That's the school in Brazil. That's one of the songs that the evening school was working, talking about the reality of the students and working with the song. That's another situation I'm not reading because I don't have time. Just to show you the Milan-inspired school, the Italian side of it, in the northwest of Italy. And that's the school, very inclusive. With in Italy, the situation was the school had a lot of immigrant kids, and all the languages were celebrated in this class, not just Italian. And here is one protest. Everything that was happening politically in Italy would be discussed in the school. This day was a day that the Minister of Foreign Affairs made a very racist comment about immigrants, and the students were outside protesting about it. And they put this banner outside. It's a banner with some words from Lorenzo Milani, saying that he didn't want a country divided, and if you have to make a division between Italians and foreigners, he will stay at the side of the foreigners. Here another project, Reading the City, and here just to contextualize nowadays, the discussion goes always back to the governments that we have in Italy and in Brazil, right-wing governments. And the students and the teachers were discussing about it also in these schools where I was visiting. And I'm still in touch with them, and they still talk about it, especially now in Brazil with the kids. That was another project that I don't have time to explain, but it's a project with language and art, the two teachers working together. And my findings were the complexity of power are explained in these schools. They have very similar critical pedagogical ideas, conscientização and critical literacy in classroom and beyond. I found in both schools, modalities and interdisciplinary contexts, especially in the Italian school, a lot of disciplines working together in projects, and language to follow the fast change in our knowledge-based society. More findings. I just want to highlight the last one, this one here. In my classrooms, I teach a lot about education without borders, and I present educators from around the world to my students, and it's always a very good result to see that they are pleased to know about people that they would maybe not have access if they didn't take a pedagogic class. So that's it. I will stop here because I think I don't have more time. Thank you. Grazie e obrigada. Stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Simona, for sharing your work in Italy and also in Brazil. So now it's time for the open session. I think Juliana.
Now, it's just because in the chat, they were already saying which work, it resonates with my work. And I would like you guys to do this and to comment what resonates with each other. And then we will do a chain, one start, and we will build it together. And it's just about time, the time that we will finish. We have 45 minutes for discussion and everything. If someone needs to leave, let us know. Let's get started. This other part. Thank you. It's just Simone. In her abstract, she had a question. Would you like to start with your question? You have it with you, or you want me to read it?
You can read it, please.
Yeah, because she said it was a provocation to everyone this evening. Then it is, what is their educators' radical legacy today in the world? This we can start. So what's yours radical legacy today in the world? What?
I'm still looking for answers. I launched the question.
Was that a question to each of us? Our radical legacy in the world? I imagine that that others, to the extent that I have some humility left, I think I'm reluctant to answer it.
Have a go, Rupert.
I'll also hope that I'm still just about young enough not to have a legacy.
Oh, maybe learn from mistakes, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things kind of struck me is the tension in some of our different talks where we're talking about kind of how things become institutionalized, you know, and how things turn into jargon, or how dialogue becomes a process or a methodology. And I think for me, one of the things I'm interested in is drawing out stuff to remember what it means to be radical. So that's why with your talk, Simona, it's really useful to be reminded what are the roots of what Melanie was doing, what are the roots that Freire was doing, and that each time we have to make our own roots. So I'm coming at this from the philosophy perspective, but looking and listening to everyone else's work, it's so wonderful and empowering to hear people talk about their own roots and how their own context flow into what they're doing. And I think that's a really important part to keep sight of.
See if I can say something. It's also about the roots and the context, because I know Milani and Freire were facing political contexts at the time that inspired them to teach in a certain way, to write certain books. And now we learn from them and we adapt to it. We have a lot of political contexts that are not the ideal for our young people. And we adapt and we use their ideas and reinvent. And I think that's what we are doing here, inspiring each other, having this group to renew our strength and do it and keep doing what we are doing.
I think the wider political context globally is particularly challenging to dialogue at the moment, because the various forms of culture war that we see being deliberately inflamed seem to me, either deliberately or just accidentally, designed to prevent dialogue, to try to set people against each other, to create new divisions even between allies, and to find new ways to dehumanize and separate people and prevent and to forestall dialogue, to make it less likely to happen. You see that particularly on the left in politics, where new divisions are being opened up all the time that people didn't even know they had. and are now dominating the political debate by setting people against each other to the point that they are screaming at each other, calling each other names. So in particular, I think the most radical aspect of dialogue is compassion. And I think I like Andrew's talking about listening at the beginning. There is too much focus on speaking in dialogue and not enough on listening. So I won't waffle on. But I think in that context, I think that's a good place to. It's good to recognize the particular difficulty of dialogue in this time.
And talking about a challenge to Angie, are you there?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just because you and more people, they talked about the work that they are doing in their institution and the challenge that you face. And could we share more about it? And
yeah, so I mean, so we talk about in our papers, and Kara and I, we talk about this meso levels of power that you need to navigate. I'm not talking about structural, like, you know, institutional policies, but more like institutional relationships. So when we have to, you know, just for a course proposal, right? Just the mention of anything that has to do with critical race theory in the United States, there's anxiety from whomever is there. They might not hold those same very right-wing US politics themselves, but there are people in our university, for example, like the highest people, the regents, like, you know, it was just yesterday, one of our regents from our university was saying, oh, I think there's too much diversity that is making white people uncomfortable, right? So we do have within those structures of power people who do not want to see our type of work. So the challenge really is not at the interpersonal level, whether or not we can, you know, teach our students to be educators, whether we're able to teach forum, whether, you know, we're able to go ahead and research about sexuality, but it's more about those gatekeepers for us to continue our work. At least in the US and the way the academic world is set up in the US, that's what we have going, right? That we have to find ways to work around. So for example, as you know, we have an intervention on, we provide our students with plan B, like ourselves. And just to do that, I mean, we were just put all of these walls on how to do that, even though plan B is over the counter and is still legal in Minnesota where we are. So, you know, like my workaround was, okay, I'm going to use my own research funds to buy plan B, because at least I can say, oh, it's an issue of academic freedom. You're not letting me buy, you're not letting me buy stuff that it is for my research, but it shouldn't be like that, because I do have the funding for that type of health intervention. But I have to think of all of those meso levels of power. And that's the challenge, at least for me in this moment in time, is, you know, how do I move beyond that? And how does Kristen and I move beyond that? And how does Kara finish her undergraduate thesis knowing all of these barriers? And that's where we see, like, still trying to work our process and learn what our models are. Did that answer your question?
I don't want to do it, guys. I will let the silence come, and you will ask yourselves, huh? Okay, we are together on that.
I actually have a question in my mind for Tara and Daniel. It was about, I was kind of surprised how much support there was from those gatekeepers that Angie was talking about. Like, it seemed, I don't know, maybe I have a negative expectation, but I was really surprised how open they seemed to be to it.
Thank you for that point, Andrew. And this was actually something that Gerard here offline was asking me about. And I did want to point out, and I believe it is on one of the slides that I was about to present in the PowerPoint, which I'll put that link in the chat again. This has been in the making for a decade now in our state of Arizona. So this was not, to your point, something that from the beginning, people were super keen on or were bought in with. It was a pilot in one school in 2013. From there, that same school district that the school was located in expanded to 5 more schools, the 2014. After that year, the entire school district expanded it to all 20 of their schools. But that same school district was the only school district in our entire state that did school participatory budgeting for a number of years. And it's only been since 2018 that we've been able to sign on other school partners to kind of create this cohort model of school participatory budgeting. And I think that that model has created a couple of things. One, the innovations that I've outlined in that PowerPoint as well of the process. So we have schools that have actually done away with police on campus and have reallocated that money to redesigning school safety. We have had other schools integrate this money into social emotional learning programming and activities for students. So it's been nice to see that innovation. And now that other schools that have not done school participatory budgeting have seen this. So again, that like demonstrative effect. Now we're having more schools take note and want to be a part of this wave.
Can I jump in here? Just based on what you mentioned there, Tara, I absolutely love this idea. I just feel really happy thinking about it. And especially when you said, you know, about students doing away with the police. I mean, I am on board with that 100%. But wow. I mean, praxis for me, it's essential, especially if we're in academic circles and we talk about the importance of theory and practice, and we talk about listening, active listening, we talk about dialogue. But often and not, we can sometimes fall into the trap of being in circles, you know, our own circles where we talk about the importance of practice, but actually not really implementing that or not actually seeing that come to fruition. And in this case, it's just so fantastic to see, I suppose, students being aware of their ability and their own labor power to change their material conditions and their social reality. And you can't teach that. You know, you can do that, you know, and I think that video really captured it very well. And that is very radical. I think that is, you know, if that was to happen on a larger scale, it would be a very, very radical form of kind of democratic restructuring. And I think as a concept, it doesn't sound that threatening, but I think it is pretty threatening. And Paulo Freire, very happy with that, and Milani as well. I mean, I would talk about them in religion, conflict, and peace, and I would use theology to kind of, you know, theorize social injustice and structural violence. But at the same time, these often become quite diluted down, and as a result, kind of in abstraction, it's harder to reconnect them to doing things in reality. But I think this is a really good, very illustrative case study that I'll definitely be drawing on.
Just Jared and Steph, I don't want this to turn into an intra-Ireland conversation, but kind of related to the same thing about the context. And in Ireland, the kind of stuff you were looking at, do you think the approach that you're talking about is regarded as a threat by anyone, because it is quite radical. I mean, if we do what is set out, it is radical and it involves big changes. So how have you negotiated that?
Yeah, you're quite right. For me, I can speak about what's needed. It's a cultural shift within the Irish education system. We can do small things, and we can do it within our classrooms, and we can see the power of a democratic classroom within, say, a faculty or a corridor. But once that moves beyond the faculty or the corridor or the classroom, then it meets resistance. And I think it's because we haven't had a success story here in Ireland yet, particularly in second level, of the power of democracy. And that's why I was really interested in Tara and Daniel's work. And tomorrow I'm going to show that video. I'd like to get the link to that video. That's the first thing I'm going to show in politics and society classes, and of course in CSPE classes as well, which for everybody else is civic, social and political education for junior level students from 12 to 15 years old. That video in itself will highlight the possibility, the potential of where democratic education can go. But like I said, it's a cultural shift, and I think we have to chip away at it methodically, bit by bit.
If I may talk, just things. I want to ask Sandra about the working with a transatlantic project, because I did it also, being like looking for educators all over, and during Milano Freire I was doing this exchange. I want to know, you had the pandemic in the middle, interrupted it, but how difficult it was going back to working transatlantic?
Yeah, I mean, it was a project that I jumped on board with exactly because it shifted from the hope of we could have a Congress together and we will all meet up, to a project that had to be reorganized in the middle of the pandemic online. So that is when the idea of, instead of bringing researchers, young researchers from Europe and the Americas, all parts, it was more than 10 countries involved. Instead of bringing them to one place for a Congress, it was shifted to an online design, right? So, and that is where the whole thing kicked off, to say, okay, how can we then produce knowledge together, which is what we had planned, in a format that is online. And that is when all these questions started actually to occur. How does the virtual space shift our ways of being together and discussing like we do it in this very same room, right? And right at this moment, it's a very similar setting that reminds me very much of what I lived back in 2020. So how is it possible to have a real dialogue? Are we having this dialogue right at this moment? It's a very interesting question. And how does the virtual space allow us to talk to each other while our individual experiences, we're sitting all in different rooms, right? And we're having a different environment surrounding us. Are we having a collective experience here? So these are the questions that started to kick off with the necessity to shift to the online Congress. Don't know if it answers your questions, but that would just resonates.
If I can just follow up, Sandra, because I was struck by, I was reading the diary entries, and the diary entry immediately after is tired, maybe, or not quite defeated, but it's tired. If you were to write one now, I mean, where is your thinking now after all the time has passed?
Well, I think it's much less emotionally or exhausted from the moment right after, and it's much more humble and thankful when you look back to all of what you could learn out of it than what it was from the very moment, like having this thing done, right? And rethinking all the emotions also you lived through, right? Not only the the things that you managed to do or not to do, but all the emotions that came with it. But I think now it's a much more humble standpoint I have, and a much more balanced view on things. Also, there were a lot of things that I couldn't put in the slide because I really wanted to make a point of, let's think about the things that do not work. There were a lot of things that were marvelous and that actually worked out pretty well, but I excluded them for the sake of time from this 10 minutes, right? To focus on really the issues, how the barriers can also help us to understand that dialogue is a really continuous process which you have to adapt, and you have to learn it over time. Also, what Tara says, it struck me pretty much, because it took 10 years for this thing to develop into what it is now, right? And the perseverance of going over it again and again and re-question again what was working, I think that's the key to making something more collective and getting also something out of it.
I was wondering, so we talked about the infrastructure and the context that enables this opportunities of more participatory or type of education or initiatives. But what about the individual skills or values or attitudes or mindsets from people, like from students? I think Happy was talking about like the value of this power dynamics with elders, and that it's very intrinsic to the individual. And I was wondering if someone has ideas on how to navigate these individual skills, or how to create the platform to provide students or people to be able to develop these skills to engage in participating in this type of education or initiatives.
I would take a chance to ask if Happy, you could start this.
Yes, sure. I put a video now. I saw okay. Hi everyone. So I would say from the case study that I've engaged in, and I already collected data at the beginning of this year, and I spoke with different young people in schools, and I could see the value of that, what that organization is doing, and in terms of creating skills like competence to be able to make meaningful conversation, and to take actions as young people. And you can see from their voice how their participation in the civil society organization, in reading and discussion themselves in schools, have nurtured them to be in their voice to be able to speak and engage in discussion in different matters. So what that organization, that the civil society organization that I'm working with as a case study, are doing is to create the education material to the young people. But the important part, what they do is they make it very they use a participatory approach, whereby in terms of creating the contents for that, for the media, for those media platforms that they use, young people themselves are engaged, and they have been, like, from the beginning of content generation and idea generation at the end, and they have different youth advisory bodies who are sitting and discuss on, like, to reflect if the content that they present in those media materials reflect young people needs, but also the language of young people, to make them interested to read and engage in this discussion based on those materials that they provide to the young people. So the content are generated for the young from young people themselves, but also they create challenges for young people in those media platforms, where to motivate them as well to engage, but to make them more concerns or more interested to with those with that media platforms. And yeah, so young people themselves, they spoke why they were interested to participate in that organization or to read the news, the different articles from the, or listen to the radio and engage in the creating the contents as well. And that's also by engaging, they have been able to have this voice to speak, and you can feel or hear it when you talk to them in the interviews. So in that case, they have also been able to go in the, not only in school themselves, but going outside in their local communities. And they do a lot of voluntary jobs, for example, cleaning in the hospitals or the local neighborhoods, if there's a plastic bottles or plastic bags and stuff. So they in the prison, they're visiting prison, people in the prison, and just provide different support to because the environment in prisons is not good. So they contribute themselves in smaller small item that they can afford, and then go to the to those places in different areas in their local communities. So in that way, they are able to speak with different people, not among themselves, but people also in the communities. And also they can make other people in the street, they can also ask them, why do you do that? So as a boy who is wearing a t-shirt that support the woman, and then people in the streets can laugh them, but that's also kind of a voice that they gain, and then they can express themselves. Why do we wear this t-shirt, which supports women empowerment? And also this kind of informative, like informed, many women who have been experienced some kind of, for example, because of you are a woman, someone can make a joke or can say something to you, or because you're a girl. And then, or if they're approached by the older women, so they have this, they have the ability to learn about why they should say no, because in most of the time, in Tanzania, we have this culture of learning from the religious culture, where you are told by it's not good to have sex before you are married, or it's not good to do this and that. But that organization informed them why exactly is not good. So it's not just, it's not good in this case, but if you do that, then there's a consequences of doing this. So they know, they have this informed no. So when they say no, they know why they are saying no. So it just goes beyond what they are religious also, but they integrate also the religious. They don't say that you should not believe what you believe, but also they try to explain to them why they should have this voice to explain and to be able to defend themselves. So there are different aspects in that way, where they have this voice to speak and to have this, to navigate from the power imbalance. Yeah, so.
Thank you. It's really important, this what we do, the informal education, formal and informal. It's sometimes, I won't say more powerful, but sometimes it is what we do in our environment out of school. Can make more change sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm just sounded, when I speak here, I hear myself like I'm being very positive towards the organization, and I'm kind of, but it is doing something which is really important. The civil society organization that Femina Hip is work to create civic engagement. That's one of their area. But so they have this voluntary spirit to the young people that you should also, not only for yourself, but think bigger also in terms of your community and the people around you. But they also have this economic engagement as part of their mission or education goal for the young people. So young people themselves, they can also earn some, they can earn themselves some money because they are provided with these skills to engage, economic skills, why is it important for you to save some money? And why do you have not to, like, there's no need to use all your money, and you can just divide your money into different areas. So others, they engage in the small, like, or informal economy, I can say that. And that also gives them the power, because it's so important for young people, especially for young girls who have been being, like, I can say, seduced by older men, and they just drop from schools because they are being offered money or other kind of materials, and then they get married in the early ages. So this is also one of the story. One woman in the interviews, one girl in the school, say that she was not engaged, she was not going to school. So when others are in schools, she was going at the beach to meet with different women, but not alone, but with other students or like fellow students in schools. But then when she started to engage in that feminine activities or the clubs that they have in schools, she has just, she could get support from the other, like peer support from those other young girls who are participating in the same organization activities. And then she stopped going to those, like to go to the beach and meet men during the class, like class hours. And that's also kind of the positive thing to speak about. And yeah, so there's different things, and now she's just doing different activities. And she say, I've learned I can make cakes, I can bake cake, and I can do this. She's in Form 4 school, so she's very, like, 17 years old. So so they just do different activities, and so it takes them their time. Instead of thinking about other things, they have other things to engage with. So
it's really interesting to hear when there's that shift to the students talking to each other as well, though. That's really powerful.
Yeah, it was, and you know, I had this like focus group discussion. Sometimes they make jokes, and so tell you a story, and then they can just point to each other, and you can see what they're saying is the true story, what happened to them, because they make conversation with each other. And they say, okay, it's this one who really helped me, because then she called me and she told me, why is it important that I stop and I get to join in this? She said, okay, just come and see what we are doing, these club activities. And then we will see if you want to continue or if you want to stop. But also this like solidarity or mutual help and support that they have themselves. For example, they just they have also group economic activities where they sell some stuff, small stuffs to their fellow students in schools, and then they raise money for themselves as a group, and they use that money to buy stuffs like sanitary pads for girls, and then they don't use those sanitary pads only when they're in school, and then they have their menstruation, sudden menstruation in schools, then they provide for themselves. But also they have these sanitary pads that the whole school, or it's kind of part of the school project that they provide for young girls when they get their menstruation in school. But most of the time, those pads are not being distributed to young girls, and the teachers still or take them and use for their own personal use. So as part of that group of FEMA club groups, which is initiatives from that Femina HIP, young girls or the group themselves, they can offer to other students who are not part of the clubs, but also the students in schools. And that kind of also it's creative. So they say, even if others who are not in the FEMA clubs, they can also come to us and ask, because they know they will not get from the teacher, or the teacher say, why you don't have go home and find yourself. So that kind of like recognition as well, being recognized. If I don't have something, I can get the support and help from this other person is really important for them.
And I would like just, are you there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
It's good. Would you like to share more about the futures literacy? Because
actually, futures literacy is quite new concept, which was raised by the UNESCO only in 2020, it's just 2 years ago. And this year, they just upload a very new definition about the futures literacy. Actually, the problem is that although they have set the futures literacy as a theme in the future education, but they haven't decide what kind of solution they can have to do the education reform, which is based on the futures literacy. So I just read all the literacy about the futures literacy, and I divide the futures literacy into 3 aspects, as I have mentioned: the multidiscipline, the global citizenship, and the subjectification. Although they haven't mentioned the 3 terms, but I think they are very closely related to the futures literacy core idea. So in my mind, I think the most important thing is to set up a framework for the futures literacy as a guide to the scholars who want to do the reform, so that I want to give this framework a very philosophy basis. So I just use the Freire's critical pedagogy as the foundation. And the other 2 scholars, as I have mentioned, they also set up a very simple framework about the futures literacy. They are about the 4 kinds of skills. But the problem is that although they have set up the framework about the four sets of skills, but they haven't mentioned the relationship between the multidiscipline, the global citizenship, and the subjectification, and the 4 set of skills. So what I'm going to do is to explain why these 4 sets of skills are important according to the critical thinking of Freire. And I also have explained why these 4 sets of skills is related to the 3 aspects. So actually, it's kind of like just building a framework from the basis and to the structure, but I haven't added any details into the framework because it's quite new concept. Maybe I will study about in the future. So I also attend online courses in the Finland University, and I found their education model is kind of a good example about how to apply the futures literacy, although they haven't mentioned that. The idea about the Finland education system is the educational leadership. And educational leadership model can regard both the teachers and the student as subjects, rather than only regard the teachers as the subjects. And the Finland educational leadership also based on the future orientation aims. So I think it's a good example to explain futures literacy can be played in some countries, but there's still some problems, of course. For example, the country's economy, the politics, and the current education systems, especially the higher education systems. In different countries, the situation is totally different. So I haven't have any data about the other countries. And I also haven't get any enough data about the Finland higher education because they only focus on the compulsory education, which means from the primary school to the high school. They haven't implemented the futures literacy in the higher education. So there's lots of aspects of futures literacy in the future need to be developed.
Thank you, and thank you for doing this, stepping this challenge.
Yeah.
Well done. And we are going to the very end. Would you like to share something? I saw that Derry, he was talking in the chat. You were having a discussion. I couldn't follow, and if you want to bring up.
Whoops. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Well, really, I'm only here by accident because a friend of mine, Roy Layton, is doing a drama workshop tomorrow morning in Cambridge. But then I read down the list of projects, and they sound so incredibly interesting. And as someone who works within the state system, trying to introduce more democracy and human rights education into the school curriculum and into school practice, some of the things I've been listening to this afternoon have been incredibly helpful. I must say, participatory budgeting is something I've tried myself in a school, and I agree with everything that Tara said. Right down to every home group having its own budget. You can take and quite young children can get involved in this as well. It's not just high school, primary school children can take part in participatory budgeting. And it sounds like, oh, money, you know, we're interested in ethics and love, we're not interested in money. But all the other aspects come into the consideration for others, consideration for relationships, listening carefully to other people's arguments and other people's point of view. It all comes into play in a participatory budgeting context. So that was for me a real highlight and has got me thinking about what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Derry, and thank you everyone for participating and being so engaged during this session. We hope you have enjoyed the day, and if you are with us in the next activities of tomorrow, we will be very happy to see you. Ju?
And please save the chat because there were very interesting arguments, and there were links for the works of participants here. And if you want, you who has the cameras off, just put it, turn it on, and then we can have a photo, because we are doing it in every section during the conference. And one thing very important is that people who participated in the conference last year is helping to organize this year. And we hope you can be part of this next year too. So leave your contacts, and I put in the chat a link for certificate. But in that link, we have a question. Would you like to have news from us? You just put yes, and let's keep having this conversation and dialogue. So I will put just this in the chat quickly. And yeah, open your camera. Thank you.
Happy, Gerard, just for the last picture. Okay.
If you feel, yeah, but just a second. Yeah, and I'm going to put 2 links in the group because we have also reading group that we did Paulo Freire's work, and then we did bell hooks. We are doing bell hooks, and then we are coming back to Paulo Freire.
Let's do a picture too.
Yeah, okay.
1, 2. Great. I think I have everyone.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, Dina and Juliana.
Bye.
Thank you.
To the interpreters. Thank you so much for being
Thanks,
with us.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Giovana?
Oi.
Você chegou cedo para outra sessão ou chegou atrasada nessa?
Eu cheguei atrasada, mas as duas coisas. As duas coisas. Eu queria ver essa, mas eu me engajei na anterior e pronto.
Tá, ó, eu vou só terminar porque a gente está fazendo uma live no YouTube. Espera lá.
Tá, eu vou sair e vou entrar outra vez para a próxima.
Tá bom. Então, um beijo, muito obrigada.
Beijo, tchau.
Are you staying in this session too?
No,
I'm leaving.
But I don't know if I can stop recording. Like, how do we stop the live?
Ah, oh, that's true. Okay, I think you can stop it.
I will stop recording, but I don't know if the live will stop. So be careful.
Let's leave.
Thank you.